What happens to a narcissist in the long run? At the beginning of their life and relationships, narcissists often appear powerful, confident, charming, and emotionally untouchable to the people around them. They know how to attract attention, gain admiration, and create the illusion that they are always in control of every situation. To outsiders, they may even look successful, emotionally strong, and admired by many different people. And for a while, this image can seem completely convincing and difficult to question. But what most people never see is what slowly happens to a narcissist over the long run of life. Because time eventually exposes patterns that charm and manipulation can no longer permanently hide. And the very behaviors that once helped them gain control over people often become the exact reasons their life slowly starts becoming emotionally empty and unstable. One of the biggest long-term consequences narcissists face is the gradual loss of genuine relationships and emotional connection. At first, they may always seem surrounded by people, attention, and temporary admiration. But most of those relationships are built on performance, control, fear, or emotional dependency instead of authentic love. And relationships built on manipulation rarely survive the test of time in a healthy way. Over the years, people slowly begin noticing the emotional patterns beneath the surface. They begin recognizing the manipulation, emotional inconsistency, and lack of genuine empathy. Friends become emotionally distant. Family members become exhausted. Romantic partners eventually become drained from constantly carrying the emotional weight of the relationship alone. And one by one, many people begin quietly walking away from the narcissist's life. Not always dramatically or loudly, but emotionally and mentally, because being around a narcissist for too long often becomes emotionally exhausting and psychologically damaging. This is something narcissists struggle deeply to understand and accept. Because they often believe people leave due to jealousy, weakness, or betrayal, rarely do they fully take accountability for the emotional damage they created over time. And this becomes incredibly dangerous for them in the long run, because without self-awareness, people continue repeating the same destructive relationship patterns again and again. Another thing that slowly happens to narcissists over time is the loss of emotional control over others. When they are younger, charm, appearance, confidence, and manipulation may work very effectively. But as life progresses, people become wiser, more experienced, and emotionally more aware. The same tactics that once impressed people begin losing their power. Eventually, many narcissists experience something they fear deeply inside themselves. They start losing admiration, attention, and emotional influence over the people around them. And for someone whose identity depends heavily on validation from others, this creates an intense feeling of inner emptiness and emotional frustration. Because underneath the confidence they project outwardly, many narcissists are constantly trying to escape feelings of insecurity and emotional inadequacy. Validation temporarily covers those feelings. Tension temporarily distracts them from those feelings. Control temporarily gives them a sense of emotional superiority. But none of it truly heals what is happening internally. And over the long run, that emotional emptiness often becomes harder and harder to avoid, especially when fewer people are willing to constantly feed their ego and emotional needs. This is why some narcissists become increasingly bitter, controlling, or emotionally angry as they get older. Not necessarily because life became unfair to them, but because the external validation they depended on becomes less reliable over time. Some narcissists spend years chasing admiration while never building genuine emotional intimacy with anyone. They may collect attention from many people but still feel deeply disconnected internally, because attention and connection are not the same thing. Admiration and love are not the same thing. And eventually, many narcissists discover that they built relationships based on control instead of trust, which means the relationships often become fragile and unstable beneath the surface. Another painful long-term consequence is loneliness. Not always physical loneliness, because narcissists may still have people around them, but emotional loneliness that comes from never truly allowing authentic vulnerability and emotional intimacy. Healthy relationships require empathy, accountability, emotional honesty, and mutual respect. But narcissists often struggle with these things because vulnerability feels threatening to their sense of control. So instead of building deep emotional bonds, they often build relationships centered around image, power, or emotional dependency. And over time, this creates emotional isolation even when they are surrounded by people. One of the saddest realities is that some narcissists reach later stages of life without truly knowing what genuine emotional connection feels like. They may have experienced attention, desire, admiration, or fear from others, but deep mutual emotional safety and authentic love often remain missing from their lives. And the longer they avoid self-awareness and accountability, the harder it becomes to break these patterns later in life, because healing requires honesty with yourself. It requires taking responsibility for the pain you caused other people. And narcissists often spend years protecting themselves from that level of emotional truth. But time has a way of revealing everything eventually. The charm fades, the masks become harder to maintain, and people become more capable of seeing patterns clearly. In the end, the greatest tragedy for many narcissists is not simply losing relationships. It is spending years chasing validation while never building the emotional depth needed to truly feel fulfilled inside. Because without empathy, accountability, and genuine connection, a person may appear powerful on the outside for many years while feeling increasingly empty on the inside.